Thank you for joining us for New Life Today. I'm Pastor Greg Tipton, your host, and I am here with my very good friend, Brett Johnson, and my co-laborer right here at New Life Center. It's good to have you, man.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be back again.
Oh, yeah. We have been having some interesting discussions and interesting topics that could go a long way and a long time. So we're trying to, as always, with all the videos, keep them concise and keep them interesting to you. So we're going to get back to our topic of who is responsible for our children in their education, in their social development, and we're going to get right to that. So I was thinking about a scripture. As always, we open with a scripture. I like to keep things in a biblical perspective, and you know, there's been a lot of stuff going on with the school board meetings, the things that are happening, just disagreement in general, whether it's cultural issues, educational issues, social issues, religious issues, and it seems like we don't have the ability to have a conversation much anymore. It turns into a hollering and screaming match. And so I was thinking about Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. It says, "Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person." So what gets me about that verse of scripture each time is the number one ingredient in our speech is grace. But we've got to have some saltiness or we'll get run over. Yes. The problem is in today's society, it seems like there's more salt than there is grace. Mm-hmm. And so that really limits our ability to talk to one another and to learn from one another. And just before we get into what we're going to talk about, I'm saying this for the benefit of our listeners. You know, we welcome the comments, whether they would be comments from those who approve of what we're talking about or whether they're comments from naysayers. Here's the reason why. I don't get upset on naysaying against me. I read those comments and I read them from the standpoint, I want to look and make sure that I am communicating in a manner that we can talk things out. And so if you've got a naysaying comment, I'm not going to get into a war over those words. I'm going to receive those. I'm going to thank you for the comments that are against me as much as I'm going to thank you for the comments that are for me. And so having said that, let's get back into our topic here. And, you know, we left off with the VSBA leaving and sending a memo that said they did not leave because of the request from the National School Board to help with the parents that were protesting and likening them to domestic terrorists. They left because of a pattern of grievances, a pattern of issues, a pattern of stuff. And so they reached out to the DOJ. And I've got a copy, and you do too, of that memo that was sent, that letter that was sent, where they asked, and I'm going to read this portion that talks about the domestic terrorist statement, and then we're going to talk about the DOJ's response. So, as these acts of malice, this is what their letter says to the DOJ, as these acts of malice, violence, and threats against public school officials have increased, the classifications of these heinous actions could be equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. Okay. And so then they ask them to enlist the help and the effort of the FBI, the National Security Branch on Counterterrorism and Division, and to enact the Gun-Free School Zone Act and the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism. And so this was sent. And I do want to point out, I'm going to get your opinion on this. I do point out in this letter, there are 14 different states that they list as where they're having problems in the school board meetings, right? So California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, Washington, Texas, Wisconsin, Wyoming, Tennessee, Alabama, these 14 states, they said, man, we're seeing problems in all of them. What say you to that?
Well, my first thing would be, with the response on the letter is heinous act.
Yeah.
I mean, since when is it a heinous act for a parent to go to a school board meeting, stand up in front of the school board, and hold that school board accountable?
Right.
I just don't understand that part of it. And, we kind of touched base on it a little bit before in a previous video, is that I don't really believe that there's these heinous acts going on. It's just
Right.
people questioning. It's not parents going and banging down doors and, like they're saying in these letters, threatening the lives of these school board members. I think it's just school board members that just need to get a little bit thicker skin.
And you said something there that is very interesting. So, the heinous acts, you don't think they're happening. You don't agree with that aspect, that outlook on it. And I would go back, something I said in an earlier video, when we saw the things going on over the summer, over some of the things that were done that were, questionable. There's no doubt they were questionable, the things that happened in Minneapolis and some of the other places. But we didn't see anything in the school boards to that degree, right? And yet we were told then that, well, that's not widespread. That's just pocketed. But yet we could see with our own eyes it was not pocketed. It was in a lot of major cities where billions of dollars, if not more, of damage done to businesses, homes, personal property, public property, so many things. And you see that happening. And so this letter from the NSBA was sent September 29th, 2021 to the DOJ. So the DOJ responds to them with a letter, and I really want to get your insight in on this one because this is what's interesting. The DOJ sends them a letter that says this: in recent months, there has been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. While spirited debate about policy matters is protected under our Constitution, that protection does not extend to the threats of violence or efforts to intimidate individuals based on their views. Threats against, and this is the one that I really had to go, huh? Threats against public servants are not only illegal, they run counter to our nation's core values. So here is what caused me to shake my head, is that just take over the summer, what happened in just Portland, not too far from us here. A police precinct, well, even in Seattle, in our very own state here, police precincts were attacked. Police officers, law enforcement, who last time I checked are public officials, were held up in those buildings where there was all sorts of projectiles and weapons of different sorts that were thrown, and they even caught them on fire, threatening to burn the building and burn them within it. And where was this letter then?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Where was that letter? I mean, so that would beg you to ask, is there a certain agenda that these guys are trying to push forward? Yep. Because of this specific incident?
Right.
I would probably ask you, one of the articles I was reading is, in regards to these letters, it has since been brought forth that the NSBA coordinated with the White House, the Department of Justice, before sending these notices out, and calling these domestic terrorists. So that would tell me that this is something that they are trying to push forward.
Right. And what was interesting is that it was denied from that level for the longest time until these emails and these memos begin to surface. And again, going back, and this is for the benefit of our hearers, I'm not here to commentate politically one way or the other, whether you should be for this party, that party, or that's not why I'm here. I'm here simply to give the information that is out there so that we, as I shared in an earlier video, be like the Bereans, where we search these things out to see if they be true and if they be correct. And in order to do that, you have to have both sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. You can't get it from just one side. I try to listen to both sides of the news. It doesn't matter. I don't try to feed off of one source or the other. I have my beliefs. I have my personal opinions. I have my personal leanings. But I don't use just that one side to create my argument. Because even on the side that I lean on, sometimes they're wrong. Mm-hmm. Period. Sometimes they're wrong. But this does, of all of the things that we've covered today, this is really kind of the stuff that really aggravated me more than anything, if I can use that term, that, the response would be that threats against public servants are not only illegal, but they run counter to our nation's core values, and yet we repeatedly over the summer saw the threats to our public officials and go unchecked, unanswered, everything.
Yeah, and talking a little bit about, too, the threats on public officials, from my viewpoint, from where I see it, is since when is it a threat for me to stand up in front of the school board and say, hey, I don't agree with the way that you're leading our children.
Right.
So I am going to do everything I can to make sure that you don't get reelected.
Right.
That's not a threat.
That's not a threat.
That's not a threat. It's just, hey, I'm going to hold you accountable to what we put you in that position to do in the first place.
Right.
But because it doesn't agree with their ideology, they're going to try and stop this thing right at the head and, threat, and try and silence you.
Yep. And do a scorched earth approach.
Exactly.
In many cases, and it goes back to the verse of scripture that I shared here, is that, when we are before those school boards, we need to let our speech be always with grace. Because I have seen, in all fairness, I want to be fair to both sides, I have seen some individuals act, as a friend of mine would say, act a fool, and, I've seen them go in, I've seen them be aggressive. And that just, anytime you're aggressive in anything, whether it's a marital argument, whether it is an argument with your children, whether it is an argument with your boss, whether it is an argument with an elected official, when you become aggressive in that, and I understand it's hard to temper that down when you feel like you're being overridden and you feel like you're being treated as an enemy. But when you go in aggressive, it shuts down communication.
It does, and there are some people that have done that, and that is obviously not the response you want to take.
Right.
But I do understand their passion.
Sure.
They're going in there with something that they just believe in, wholeheartedly. And, in times when you want to try and get your point across, what do? You raise your voice.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So I do understand that, but, it is something that you do need to handle with grace.
Right. And one of the things, and again, we've run out of time, man. It just does not take long. But one of the things that my wife will say to me oftentimes, she'll say, why are you hollering at me? And I'm like, I'm not hollering at you. I'm just passionate about what we're talking about. And so you do understand that. And some of us, I'm a very charismatic, type of guy, and very animated in a lot of the things I do. Even when I minister and I preach, that character comes out of me. And so a lot of it is also how we're geared, how we're made. And none of us are going to fit into a one cookie cutter method. But with such topics as we're dealing with here, and such topics as scripture, and such topics as morality, and so many things, we have to have a measured response and a measured reaction. So I'll give you the last word.
My last word. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, if you ever want to try and make a change, I mean, you do have to be passionate about what you do. But you also need to, like I said, do it with a sentiment of grace.
Right.
I mean, because if you do that, then people are going to understand and they're going to see, that you truly are passionate about this and you do want to see something good.
Yep. Well said. And listen, if you are enjoying this, hang with us. We've got another video coming up that will be available. We're going to talk about who is questioning all of this. It's going to kind of surprise you. So you'll want to stay tuned for the upcoming videos. Until the next time, listen, I'm believing for the best for you. I'll see you in a little bit.